Welcome to the Tough Fish Show. I am so excited to bring to you Linda Ruggeri. Linda, I am so glad you were on the show.
I'm thrilled to be here today.
I am so glad you are. And I would love for you to start with how did you get into writing?
Gosh, I think I grew up in a family that read tremendously. And on my dad's side of the family, they would check out books from the library in Argentina. This was back in Argentina, in Cordoba. And whoever had one book, it would circulate around the whole family. And even though these were my uncles that were adults, I would usually get to read these books. And I was just fascinated by the words. And I started copying parts of paragraphs that I liked into my little journal. And I must have been like
Oh,
9 or 10. And just always keeping, and I didn't understand everything, but I knew the stuff that I did understand or that I like how it was written. And I wrote my first kind of romantic story for a friend of mine when I was 11. And I say that I published that because I gave it to her in a notebook, and then it circulated amongst our group of friends, so everybody got a chance. So I had my first like little audience there. And then I have it on the back burner because I've decided now as an adult I can expand on that story and make it much more interesting, because it was a good story. But that was kind of my first kind of incursion into having a love for words. And I also did really well in my literature classes in high school, and I got pulled aside by the teacher asking me and kind of encouraging me to pursue that. So I ended up studying journalism, kind of like you. I did that in Argentina for 2 years, and then when we came to the States again, I majored in communications.
yep, that was my major too. Basically, it's a communications major
Yeah,
with the emphasis in
yeah.
journalism and PR. So yeah, that's awesome. And I love the fact that you wrote this story, you circulated it, because in a sense, it also kind of felt like you kind of had a little bit of beta readers going on. Like, do you
I
like the story?
did.
What's going on? And
I did. And I
that's
still have it I have that little folder because then it was given back to me. I think in my like late 20s, my friend gave it back to me as it's something that I could treasure. And I love it. And I still love the story. And I need to get that one done. I don't write a lot of fiction. I publish mostly nonfiction, but this is a book that's on the back burner that it will get done within the next 2 years for sure.
oh, I love that so much. I just think that's so fantastic. And you're right, because sometimes like a teacher might just plant that seed of, hey, I think you have I can see talent here, or you might want to consider this, or what have you. I saw something similar too throughout different in high school and again in college. So that's really cool to hear that with you.
Yeah, I think that having that encouragement, especially because I don't have a family that actually writes, there are no writers in the family, just a lot of heavy readers. And so having someone point that out and encourage me was really helpful. And at least, like you said, it planted the seed and it made me know that there was something there I could always go back to if I wanted to. So yeah, I've been writing, I feel off and on for, yeah, since I was really young.
So let's look at the other side of writing, because one aspect is you have to get the thing out of your head and put it down on paper. And then once it's on paper, sometimes it needs refining, sometimes it needs
Yes.
polishing, sometimes it needs restructuring and then refining. So, and you are an editor. So how did you kind of transition into from the writing side to the editing side?
I think a lot of editors start off as you're passionate for words, you can notice mistakes, and that's kind of what brings you into the curiosity of what if I did something in editing. And I started editing kind of later in life and taking classes, I joined a couple of different editorial organizations that I'm still a part of, and that was really fundamental into understanding what an editor does and the significance of an editor. And when I started getting my first projects, just being able to see how you could really lift a manuscript and help an author. I always say the editor is the reader's advocate. And we're there on behalf of the readers to make sure that we're interpreting the message the way the author intended to, and that we're really understanding what the author was trying to say. And sometimes when you're so wrapped up in your story and in your work, it's really hard to see what you don't see and to know what you don't know. And so having an editor as your guiding light on the manuscript, I think is fundamental. So even though I'm a nonfiction bilingual freelance editor, I edit in Spanish and in English, and I do mostly developmental editing and copy editing. And one of the things that I really try to do always is to help the author that I'm working with really reach that maximum potential that that book has, so that they can reach their intended readers the way they wanted to, and so that you have the most positive reviews when your book is out there. So, I always tell the authors editing is not something that I skimp on. And I have two editors that edit my books, and it would never occur to me to edit my own books because I'm just too close to the material. And one of the things that I notice, I'm kind of one of those that goes to read those bad reviews on Amazon. And it's usually related to, the story said it was going to deliver this and it didn't deliver it, or there's typos, or there's grammar mistakes. And it takes one negative review on any platform to really bring down your average reviews. And then why do that when there's an option, there's a better option, and somebody else can take another, look at it and help you out. So besides being an editor, I am an advocate of editing, and I don't edit my own work. I always hire someone to do that part of it.
Same here.
Yeah.
I think, but when you are writing your own piece, so you are now putting on the author hat, I look at that and go, that is what I'm trying to do. And yes, I can handle structuring it, but in the same breath, I want another set of eyes. You don't know when you know that you might be missing something, but in the same breath, like you said earlier, you want that story to be the best it can possibly be, the strongest it can possibly be. You want to create a great experience for your reader. And yes, you can do that, but you don't have to do it in a vacuum. You can get help, and when you find the right teammates, when you find that right person or several who are encouraging you, who are giving you feedback in a way that is going to be something you can receive, then you are going to have a better product, and you're going to be more excited to talk about it too.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And then the value that I see editors that have edited my work that they bring to the table is tremendous. It's tremendous. It's stuff that I would have never thought about. So getting suggestions to say like, hey, this example is good, but maybe you could, if you twisted it this way or you rewrote it this way, you could, and it just blows me away how there are editors that have these great ideas that can help, again, elevate my work, that they're looking out for me. So yes. And editing, something I want to mention is that editing is not inexpensive. It's just like any other job. You will pay an editor. There are rates that people follow. And that to me is the best investment. That with a good cover, a professional book cover designer that understands the publishing market, that understands the purchasing behavior of your reader is key to me. So I always budget when I know I have a new book coming out. I will start saving up a year in advance because I want to be able to hire that kind of book cover designer and that kind of editor that are just really going to, iron out all the things that I'm not able to do so I can focus on the writing and what I do best.
And that's another great point, that you are basically, when you are bringing in the right cover designer, to your point, or the right editor or what have you, you are also maximizing, you're using other people's strengths to help you so that you can focus your own strengths where you want it to be.
Yes.
And the message and the story you want to tell. So when you can spend your time and focus on that, and then working with an editor or two who are going to help you to really shape that and strengthen it, I mean, it's going to be something that you feel so excited about. And you will also know then, when you feel more solid in that story, that cover is going to speak to you even louder, because you might get a proof back and go, well, that's cool, but you might have a better idea of how to tweak it, or you might see another proof and go, no, that is it, because I'm very clear about what I'm trying to do or what the premise of the book is. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so when I work with editors that edit my work, either they're editing my blog posts or editing the books that I'm putting out, I'm always excited because I get asked this a lot, like what it's like to be edited when you're an editor. And it's kind of an out of body experience where I have to remove myself as the editor and acknowledge that the same way I work with authors and I try to point things out that they might not be able to see, having that feedback from an editor, from a professional editor, is invaluable. It really makes my work so much better. So
absolutely. And going back to that, you trust them. And that's something that that they have your best interest at heart. They're not trying to
no, absolutely.
put you down or anything like that. They're actually looking at it going, okay, obviously they saw potential because they said yes to your project anyway. And then they're trying to help you take it to another
Yeah.
level. So
Yeah, and then the feedback that I'm seeing is feedback that makes sense.
mhm.
I'm one of those that, even though I work with CMOS and I know, I work with style sheets and everything, in my own work, that stuff is not as important to me as some of the developmental editing content and some of the, did I develop the idea correctly? Did the point come across the way it was intended to? I always give them also who's my target reader, who's my target audience. These are, and I will have specific questions for them. Does this does this make sense? Do the examples, are those the right examples? Am I really maximizing the potential of that paragraph with that example? And so, yeah, it's such a collaborative process, and for me, it's a very enjoyable one too.
So you mentioned a word in there. I would love for us to talk a little bit about, in fact, I'd like us to go a little bit in depth with, which is the collaboration part. And that really, to me, is you get to collaboration because you've done networking. So I would love for you to talk about, intentionally networking, intentionally creating connections. And the reason I'm asking that is because, one, I know you've written some books that are
Yes.
about networking with that intentionality there. But the other is that you really can't get to a true collaboration without having had made an intentional connection. And so would you talk a little bit about like what your thoughts are there, like how to even start something like that?
So I think my first book that I wrote with Brittany Dowdle, who's another fellow editor, it's called Networking for Freelance Editors. It's a workbook. So it's a book, with worksheets and things, questions to be answered inside. And that book came about because Brittany and I were, and this, I'll get to the collaboration part, but we were basically working with a program that was helping new editors to the freelancing business, how to establish themselves as freelance editors, or if they were coming from different careers and transitioning into full-time editing, what that was like, and things. We kept getting these same questions asked throughout the program. Everybody has the same goals. We want more work. We would like to make more money. We'd like to have better projects. And a lot of the answers, or most of the answers to those questions, were about, well, who are you connecting with now? Who are you collaborating with now? And if you're not collaborating with anyone and you're not connecting with anyone in an intentional way, it's very hard to get the work you're trying to get, because nobody knows what your services are. Nobody knows if they can trust you. Nobody knows what it's like to work with you. One of the things that comes from the book, and one of the chapters, we had this sprinkled throughout the book, and then we had to take it all out and just make one chapter because it played such a huge role, was volunteering. And volunteering as a networking superpower. Because when you volunteer for things that are close to your heart and things that you're passionate about, people get to see your work ethic. They get to see your disposition, your attitude, and all of those things matter at the end of the day. And it's the person that you meet while volunteering is probably not the one that's going to hire you for a project, but it's the people that they know who are going to hire you for a project. So you're always, when somebody's thinking, like, somebody that I met, and this happened to me at the last conference I was at. I was volunteering at the Editorial Freelancers Association table, giving out information. Somebody came up. We started talking about what kind of editor. We had cookbook in common. We both like to edit cookbooks. Somebody else heard us. They came up. And so all of that led to, now we're going to have a meeting for cookbook editors so that we can brainstorm what's happening in the cookbook editing world. We have a store lined up that's going to meet with us as well that sells cookbooks. So it's kind of, there's no work involved per se, but it's a connection of the minds to get to know each other. And eventually it's going to lead to a project. It's going to lead to work for one of us. It's just establishing those intentional connections that always leads to new opportunities. And we've talked about this before, and the way we've met as well, volunteering for another project, that you just realize, well, we have so much in common, and maybe we can refer work to each other, or we can start a new project together. So yes, collaboration and connecting in an intentional way when you're an editor, especially a freelance editor, or when you're an author, is just as important. And so that's kind of why the second book, which is Networking for Writers, came about, because once our book was published and we started going and giving presentations, we started, and now at this point, not only are we editors, but we're indie authors and we're author publishers. The same networking situations arise in that, as you know, arise in that world. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and so it's how are we connecting with other indie authors? How are we connecting with other indie publishers? And those, again, these are opportunities that are going to keep showing up, that are going to create new opportunities. And what we were talking about earlier is when you're a self-published author, you're networking on so many different levels. That's, at one level, you're connecting with your ARC readers, with the people that might become your street team and help promote your book in the future. But you're also going to be connecting, you're going to need a publishing team, and you need to plan for that. And who do you need to meet? Who do you need to have in your publishing team? How are you going to access them? How are you going to intentionally connect with them and get to learn about their businesses and their work ethic, and if they're a good match for you? And ideally, these connections that you're forming are going to be long-term connections because they're intentional and they're not transactional. That's my biggest pet peeve about networking, is when people approach networking from a transactional point of view, because rarely does that last. And you don't always get the best results in my experience.
I totally understand that. Would you help the audience to understand maybe what that might look like if if the listener is not realizing that maybe they've even experienced that themselves?
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of different ways of showing how networking is transactional, I think. And it's usually when you expect something in return immediately. So the handing of business cards back and forth without asking about the other person, without, asking intentionally, what do you do? What's your favorite project? What line of work are you in? Who do you work with? Just really, I actually genuinely care about every person that I met and I meet, and I would like to know what's their backstory. How did they get, like with you, how did you get into writing? What kind of books do you like to put out? Because I want to know where you stand, so that to see what things we can collaborate with. The transactional networking that doesn't, I think, work is if you have to go to a party and you have to buy a cocktail and you have to stand there with your drink trying to go meet people and sell yourself. It's uncomfortable. Very few people are good at that. And I don't think that that's the best way always to connect with people. And we do have a little bit of these outdated ideas about networking, but thankfully, these last 3 years where things have been kind of turned over, there's so many different ways to connect and to network in a more intentional way. So I always approach networking as, what can I bring to the table? How can I help somebody else? What information do I have that might be useful to you? And can I share that openly with you without expecting anything in return? And the return eventually comes, but it just doesn't have to be there and immediate.
Yes, I love that so much. And you're right. You might be at an event where, even if it's designed to be, and it's actually called a networking event, and you bring business cards, but that's great, but get to know that person and have the conversation, and maybe even wait to be asked to say, hey, can I get your business card? Because then they're actually interested voices going, here's my business card. It's a little different than if I'm asking. It's also a form of like permission marketing, because I've asked you and then you've said, oh yes, but I've told you, yes, I'd like more. And you've given me the next step by giving me the card. So it's a form of basically
Yeah.
creating that bridge in a step and building that piece by piece versus going, let me just fire hose you with everything that I can do.
Yeah, no, exactly. No. And I think I always try to ask people, what are you struggling with right now? What keeps you up at night? And okay, is there something that I might know, or someone that I might know that I can refer them to, where I can say, hey, there's this great resource that I use, you should check it out. And I think just trying to be there intentionally and you can't always do that, and that's okay. And because I know that we've talked in one of your other episodes, you guys discussed about, what about for introverts? And one of the things about networking is that I'm a bit of an ambivert, so I oscillate between the two. But it's very available. It's easy to network if you're an introvert also, if you know what your personal communication style is, if going into an event, how you're going to introduce yourself. if you know what you're trying to get out of that event. A lot of times Brittany Dowdle and I have these pre-conference sessions for people that are going to conferences, and we'll work together saying, okay, why are we going to that conference? What are we trying to get out of that? Who are we trying to meet? Why are we trying to meet them? And then just having those thoughts in mind makes going to the conference now a lot more intentional, a lot more goal-oriented. And I can still go and meet these people, but I'm already prepared with what I'm going to share about myself and what I'm going to be asking you about, so that we can have a good connection, an honest connection.
Yes, I love that. And to your point, when you're on the receiving end, so let's say somebody has approached you who has done, and it seems as though they're intentional with that. What do you recommend? What do you do afterwards? Like, how do you follow up with them? How do you kind of bring that out of that conference space and into that next environment? What do you recommend, or what do you see?
So I do a lot of things. I'm a business card collector, and I know a lot of people don't like that. So first thing is, when I meet someone I have a Sharpie always on me. And so when I meet someone at a conference and they give me their card, I will write on the back what session I was at, what was something specific about that person that I want to remember, or who I need to, like the cookbook people that I met, I wrote on that card, cookbook meeting. And I'll bring that home, and I don't sit on things for very long, because if I sit on them, I forget. So I'll at least send out an email saying how nice it was to meet them. I'll write what was memorable about meeting them. And then I will, share maybe something that we could participate in together, or an event or did you know about this conference, or will you be at that conference? So I'll try to establish a connection. The same thing with LinkedIn. One of my pet peeves about LinkedIn, and I'm going to bring this up because it happens a lot, is people that try to connect with you with no note. Why would I want to connect with someone that I don't know, or that I maybe met in passing, and that I don't know why we should be connecting? What's in there? Why would you like to connect with me? And so I do appreciate getting personal notes. If I don't have a note that gets sent to me on LinkedIn, I usually will not accept the connection. And then if I'm trying to connect with someone, I make a point of finding out, telling them why I want to connect with them, what I like about the work that they're putting out there.
Yes, I am so on the same. Or the other type of note in LinkedIn, when it's, hey, I like what you're doing. I think we could work together. Great. How? I mean, and it's almost kind of
Exactly.
like, I can tell that you've just written something that's canned and you're applying
Exactly.
it, and I can tell you don't know what it is. Or my favorite is when, it looks like you might write books. Really? You think that, huh? It's pretty clear on my profile what I
Yeah.
do. And so, okay,
It's exactly, it does. I don't think it works, and there's no point to it. And so like, I also like once a year, I'll kind of like go Marie Kondo on my LinkedIn account and like clean out all the connections that
me
maybe
too.
don't particularly bring me joy, but that are not connections that I need to have at this point in my life right now. And so I try to stick to the connections that are meaningful, that are going to, these are people that I'm learning from, that they're bringing value into my work or my life, and the stuff that I put out as well. I don't
Yes.
post random stuff. I try to post stuff that can bring value to someone else's, project or someone else's work. So this is that kind of thing, like where less is more, and more, being more intentional is better, and pays off, I think, bigger and better results as well.
I love that. I love that so much. And like, so as the author, from the author standpoint, maybe they're at a craft fair. And I know we were chatting about this ahead of time, but maybe they're at a craft fair. And so they have had some transactional activities of somebody comes up, somebody purchases the book, you sign it, they take the book away. That's a transactional activity, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's
Exactly.
great.
Yes.
That book,
Yeah.
that transaction might lead to a subsequent connection, because that person might reach out to you later and tell you about something, or reach out to do something else. But you also will have opportunities where you might be planting seeds, in the sense of saying, someone else might come up and say, do you do XYZ? Do you, for instance, do you do school visits? Do you do speaking engagements? It looks like you're an editor too. Do you teach on this? Or I'm writing a manuscript. Is it possible that, you could look at that or recommend somebody? You don't know where that connection will happen because you were present. And so one of the things I will I've talked about here, but the way I think about that too is that you're planting seeds. And some of them will germinate, some of them won't. But when you're detached from that outcome and you're saying, I'm here trying to make a connection, put my best foot forward, and see what's
Always.
possible, I mean, you don't know where that will go.
Always, always. And again, it's not about reaching, 300 people at the same time with a canned email or that canned LinkedIn. No, that leads nowhere. Having more LinkedIn followers or Instagram, like that means nothing if you're not really connecting with your audience. And so I have my Instagram account. I'm an Instagram person
Mhm.
because I like visual things, and that's a platform that
Me
I
too.
enjoy. And so I'm on it because I enjoy it.
Mhm.
And I'll post stuff related to editing and to writing. And my following is not that high, but it's all organic. It's all, not paid for. It doesn't have to be. And I really appreciate that because I get to really interact with people that follow me. And then I interact with people that I follow also. That's another example. I will post comments, mindful comments. I won't just
Yes.
hit, emoji commenting doesn't really count unless it's a friend who knows me that I can, okay, do a
Yep.
like or something. But really taking the time to reply to a post, to say something kind, to say something, all of that, I think always, it's like all having, you're filling somebody else's bucket and your own bucket at the same time.
Yes, I
And it does pay
totally
off.
agree. Yes, yes. When I like you, LinkedIn and Instagram are the two I primarily hover around, and I want my comments to be thoughtful, intentional, mindful, and so yes, I will definitely put like an emoji, but it's
Yeah.
usually with people that I'm really close with, or if there's been
Yeah,
some kind of dialogue that's already happened. And it's a lot of
exactly.
times I'm doing that as a response because they did that too. So it's also an acknowledgement too. Sometimes it's that mirroring element. But
Yeah.
but yeah, and like you, mine's organic and that's okay. I would much rather it be that way. And to your point about the pruning, the cleaning in LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I do that on Instagram also because
Yeah.
I want it to be a true community. I want it to have that connection there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I totally agree with you there. Definitely. Definitely.
Great. Yeah.
So talk to me about what it was like then co-authoring a book about networking for editors and you're co-authoring with an editor. I mean, you're
Mhm.
putting together all these different tools and this book isn't just any kind of book, it's a workbook. So how did you guys kind of think through all that?
It really happened naturally because when we started, we were running this program and I was typing these long emails, answering questions sometimes, and I just kept saving. I'm like, this is great material. This is going to be good for a blog post. And then those blog posts just got to be too many. And it felt like, okay, we could reach a lot more people at the same time if there was a book that everybody could buy when it was the right time for them in their careers. And that's kind of how the concept of the book came about. And then we did an outline in the collaboration or the working in a collaborative writing relationship. If you have if you have the right partner, it can be a phenomenal thing. And I couldn't be more grateful, more excited. I met Brittany through a random networking thing as well. We always laugh that had people told us back then when we met for coffee one day to talk about editing, if somebody had said like, oh, 5 years from now, you guys will have, there'll be, a book out, you'll be giving presentations, you'll be teaching, you'll have courses, like it just seems so unreal. But it was a wonderful experience because we both came to it from the same angle that we have something to give, we have something to contribute, and we have someone next to us who's going to keep an eye out for what we're writing and make it better.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we go through the book now and I look back at it and I'll read a paragraph. I'm like, God, that is so good. Did I write that or did she write that? Because sometimes I don't recognize my own, and it happens a lot. I don't recognize my own writing because I get into in that author mode. And so I'm writing at a certain level or with a certain frame of mind. And so it was really great. We alternated, I think initially we set out what were the specific topics we needed to have in the book and that we wanted to cover. We had a target word count. We knew already really well who our target audience was because we live among editors. We were working with freelance editors and we were very much immersed in these communities. And we knew what were the difficult questions that everybody was being faced with or trying to overcome. And we split up the work, and I would write, we kind of picked which were the chapters we were each more comfortable writing, and then we reviewed each other's work, and it was excellent. It was so easy to write, so
Love it.
easy to write. And so
Love
when you
it.
have, yeah, and then trusting that if I'm not married, I'm never married to my words, because if there's a different way of saying it that's going to be clearer or more concise, I want to be told that, because that's going to be better for the reader. It's at that point, once the words are on the page, they stop kind of being my words and they become the words for the reader. And I like leaving that open to critique and to judgment, and for someone else to tell me if it can be done better. And I think it's really great to have a collaborator or co-author, because things get done faster. You have someone to brainstorm with and to discuss things. And yeah, it just makes, for me, absolute sense for this kind of book, for sure. I don't know how it would work in fiction. It would be the same. But for prescriptive nonfiction or these kind of books, I think it works phenomenally great. And you know that as an author who's co-authored as well.
Yeah, yeah. So how was that transitioning then from the co-authored book to your current book, which is for authors, and it's also networking, but it was just you?
Yeah. So this new book, Networking for Writers, is a book that's intended actually for all types of writers. So whether you're a book author, or whether you're writing, papers for scientific journals, or you're a screenwriter, or you write web copy, the idea here is that we all need to still be connecting and building our small networks and our broad networks in an intentional way, because you really never know sometimes where the next big project or the next client is going to come from. And there's, these incremental steps in the book of where you need to start at, and, how to build these networks that you're going to need eventually to be able to have sustainable work in the future. So perhaps the biggest challenge with the first book, and I still think it's the biggest challenge, is that this was a book that was intended for editors. And we knew that every single word, every comma, every period, every paragraph structure and sentence was going to be scrutinized by everybody. And there were a couple of decisions that I had to let go of things that I was very adamant about keeping, that I had to, that I willingly succumbed to CMOS. And I was like, okay, because I just didn't want to create a conversation or a distraction in the book when the book was not about a comma or a period or, some grammar rule. The book was about something else. And so on that one, we went very heavy with following all the rules, because we knew who our audience was. In this new book, I allowed myself more flexibility, because it's not a book for editors, but it's a book for writers, and how to find those sustainable communities and where to find the work. And the last chapter of the book, however, is intended for book authors. And that's about the communities and the networks that you're going to have, first of all, to produce your book, but then also to be able to sell your book. And that would be also, including your readers. And so that last chapter is just dedicated specifically for writers of books, because that's a different kind of networking than if you're, a freelance screenwriter, or if you're writing for newspapers.
Yeah.
So it was a great experience as well. There was a little bit nerve-wracking because you're flying solo on that one. But again, I have the experience. I've been immersed in these worlds, and so I know what it's like. And knowing that I had a phenomenal copy editor, proofreader, and book cover designer, and every chapter of the book, I have short snippets of authors that are successful authors, published authors out there that have been writing, that I've asked questions to. So every chapter has a few real life networking experience from successfully published authors. And that was really key to me, to be like, not only is this my take on things, but here's someone else's take on things, and why, intentional networking has worked for them and how it's paid off.
Oh, I love that. I think that's great, because you're right. You're not just, I'm teaching you, but I'm also showing you in different ways of application. And just because it might not resonate with one example, but another example might, but it's still the commonality there. So I think that's fantastic, because the more that you can get comfortable presenting your message, getting out there, showing up, and trusting that, you're going into a friendly place. if you go in with the mindset, this is going to be, I'm going into a friendly environment, the host or the people there, I'm going to meet some people that I will connect with, that
Yeah.
they'll like me or I'll like them, we'll have a great connection. And you don't know where that will
Yeah.
go, but just staying open to that is just so important, because you didn't write that book and hit publish just for it to sit on a shelf. You wrote that book
Exactly.
because it was
Yeah.
in your heart. You hit publish because you didn't have to. You didn't have to go that far. You could have just said, I wrote what I needed to write, and this was just what I needed to do. But if you went, to the extra effort, went that extra mile to get it published,
Mhm.
why wouldn't you want to get it into the hands of the readers that you wanted to connect with? So, and in order to do
Yeah.
that, you got to get more visible.
And you need, when you look, I'm very observant, and I'm always looking at what are the successful people doing? What are the successful authors doing? And I will be following them and just seeing what's happening in their world that is not happening in my world, and what do I need to be doing maybe. And I think it takes a lot of self-criticism and being able to see where my shortcomings might be and what I could be doing differently, and learning from these successful authors. And none of these successful authors are at it alone. It's not a solo journey. The writing, on your computer, that might be the solo journey part. But after the words hit the page, you need to have connections. You need to have people involved that are going to help you get that book to where it needs to be, and for that book to be sold. And that's going to happen. We talked about this a little bit earlier too, like writing the book sometimes if you've been a published author, you know that writing the book is the easiest part. Selling the book is what is the hardest part. And to sell the book, you're going to need a community out there that you belong to, that you've created, that's intentional, that is going to be there every step of the way to support you, so that book does get sold and that you can continue writing more books. So networking, even though it's not discussed, I feel it shouldn't be discussed because it's not part of the craft, but it needs to be discussed as the part of the back end of the business that you're going to have in place to be able to sell your book successfully.
Absolutely. I so love this conversation, Linda. You are amazing. Where can people connect with you, and where can they get your books?
So the books are on the networkingstudio.com. We have this community space there. Both books are there, Networking for Freelance Editors and Networking for Writers. And we also have Networking para Editores Freelance in Spanish. So that was our big thing this year too, is having the book translated into Spanish. And then my website is theinsightfuleditor.com. And I'm also on Instagram as The Insightful Editor. And my information about the kind of editing that I do, my blog posts, and what my author journey has been like is kind of documented there as well.
Awesome. Linda, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing so much goodness. This has been fantastic.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for having me.